Ungrateful, my father said. And my stepmother laughed like cruelty was an inside joke. The table joined in, polite, rehearsed. I sat still, smiling like it didn't cut. You're right, I said softly. I should thank you for teaching me what love isn't. The room quieted. Declan's grin faded. Vivian's glass trembled. Sterling's eyes stayed cold. I rose, raised my glass. A toast. To the last time you'll ever see me. And I meant it. My name is Patricia Draven, the daughter they tried to erase from their story. Tonight I erased myself on my own terms. Before I tell you everything, say hi in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. It's good to know I'm not alone. Because this isn't just revenge. It's revelation. The silence that followed me home that night wasn't peace. It was punishment. No clinking glasses. No hollow laughter. Just the hum of the refrigerator. And the sound of everything I'd lost. I opened my laptop. And the ghosts returned in pixels. My law school graduation. My name echoing across the stage. I searched the crowd for my family. But their seats were empty. Rows of strangers cheering. None of them mine. Hours later, a message from Vivian. Sorry, we couldn't miss Declan's birthday. It's once in a lifetime. Once in a lifetime. So was mine. I told myself to forgive. To understand. To move on. But some wounds don't close. They calcify. Then came the second cut. An email from the bank. Subject line, account activity notice. My mother's education fund, gone. Authorization signature, Sterling Draven. When I called, he sounded calm, almost proud. Declan needed a push. You'll figure it out. That tone, steady, cold, hurt more than shouting ever could. 2 jobs. 3 loans. Hands shaking from exhaustion. Still, I smiled when people asked how I was doing. Nights bled into mornings. Coffee replaced sleep. I studied contracts by candlelight. Because I couldn't afford the power bill. Once, Vivian called. Not to ask how I was. But to remind me Declan's startup had been featured in a magazine. Her voice dripped sugar. Isn't that exciting? She said. I said nothing. I just watched the cursor blink over my resume, wondering if dignity could fit between the lines. Because that's what good daughters do. They keep quiet. They endure. But silence doesn't heal. It rots. They erased my memories. But not the proof of what they'd done. The day I decided to leave Austin, the city felt heavier than usual. Even the air carried their names. Sterling. Vivian. Declan. Every billboard, every headline, a reminder that silence never saved me. I packed 1 suitcase. Laptop, proof, the photo of my mother. The only one they hadn't erased. Rowena Vance, my mother's sister, was the last person in this family who ever looked at me with kindness. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She had gripped my hand then and whispered, "You're not alone." Santa Fe was 600 miles of quiet. Dust, desert, and a long road to answers. The sun bled into the horizon, turning the sky into something that looked like forgiveness. When she opened the door, her eyes carried decades. Calm, tired, knowing. She didn't ask why I came. She just said, "You're ready now, aren't you?" Inside, the house smelled of cedar and paper. Stacks of letters, faded photos, and the weight of truth waiting to breathe. She brought out a wooden box, edges worn, lid scratched with time. "Your mother wanted this safe," she said. "I kept it until you could face it." Inside lay the original will. My mother's handwriting, steady and clear. The education fund, mine alone. No transfer. No exceptions. My throat tightened. It wasn't about money. It was proof that she believed in me. Proof that love, at least once, had been real. I ran my fingers across her name, tracing the loops of her signature like a prayer. For the first time in years, I felt her voice return, quiet but certain. Rowena spread papers across the table. Bank records, dates, transfers, all pointing to one place, Declan's startup. She hesitated, then handed me another file. Technical logs. Access times. Someone had entered my computer remotely. The same week Declan helped set up my Wi-Fi. I remembered the humiliation of that stolen project, how it reappeared under his name. I had thought it was my fault. It wasn't. Piece by piece, everything clicked into place. Graduation forgotten. Funds stolen. Ideas sabotaged. All threads of the same design. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because you weren't ready," Rowena said. "You still wanted their love to be real." Her words didn't break me. They steadied me. Because I finally saw what she meant. I looked at the proof spread before me. Ink, signatures, dates that refused to lie. It wasn't anger filling me now. It was clarity. Cold, precise. The kind that burns cleaner than rage. The story I'd been told was a lie. The truth was finally mine to use. They thought they buried me in silence. But silence can be broken. Back in Austin, the city didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage I'd already outgrown. Morning light crawled across my kitchen table. And that's when the courier knocked. A white envelope, thick, embossed with gold. The Draven family crest pressed into the seal. Inside, a letter written in careful legal charm. In the spirit of family harmony, we invite you to voluntarily withdraw from the estate and trust planning process. Words like goodwill and understanding scattered across the page, like confetti hiding a blade. I read every line slowly. It wasn't a request. It was exile, disguised as civility. They wanted me to erase myself, so they could call it my choice. For a moment, I almost laughed. After all these years, they still thought control came wrapped in courtesy. I poured a glass of wine. Though it was barely noon, the burn steadied my hand as I signed my name. Then, beneath the printed lines, I wrote in my own handwriting, I don't want a cent from those who never wanted me, but I will keep the truth. The pen shook slightly, not from doubt, but from release. Every stroke felt like cutting the last thread that tied me to their illusion of love. The ink dried like a promise. I sealed the envelope and set it aside. They would think they'd won, that I'd finally surrendered. But surrender and silence aren't the same thing. That night, I opened my laptop. The folder of proof glowed on the screen. Emails, transfers, signatures, the will. Years of ghosts, now turned into weapons. I wrote a subject line. You should all see this. No accusations, no explanations. Just 4 attachments. Dropped into their inboxes like grenades. When I hit send, the sound felt final, like closing a door that would never open again. Hours later, the news broke. The Dallas Tribune headline burned across every screen. The Draven cover-up. Stolen funds, erased names, family lies. That night was the Draven Foundation Gala. Chandeliers glittered like they were trying to outshine the shame. Camera flashes flickered like lightning over calm faces pretending not to know. Vivian stood at the podium, her smile cracking like porcelain. Sterling's jaw tightened, his knuckles white against the table. Whispers multiplied, sharp as glass. The orchestra faltered mid-song. Declan was nowhere in sight. He had disappeared, just like integrity. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just watched truth do what revenge never could. Expose. Their empire didn't fall because I destroyed it. It fell because it was hollow. By morning, their denial was everywhere. Declan called it slander. Sterling called it betrayal. Vivian called it fiction. They flooded the press with polished statements. Our daughter is unwell. She's been struggling for years. Please respect our family's privacy. It was the same trick they'd always used. Bury the truth by burying me. I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I just watched their empire twist under its own lies. Then my phone buzzed. Rowena. Her voice was steady, almost calm. Kais, she said, the name only my mother used. There's one last thing. Check your inbox. An affidavit. Official notarized. A statement from my old law firm's HR department. It confirmed everything. Evidence logs traced back to Declan's credentials. Remote access from his account. The same weekend he'd helped me set up my Wi-Fi. I stared at the document, my breath catching. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof, stamped and sealed. I forwarded it to Nora Whitlow, the journalist who broke the first story. I typed only 2 words. Use this. By noon, the headlines spread like fire. Corporate theft confirmed. Evidence ties Draven heir to stolen work. News anchors dissected it live on air. Clips of the gala replayed side by side with bank records. Social media turned ruthless. Hashtags, screenshots, timelines. The truth moved faster than their excuses ever could. The fallout was instant. Draven heir's stock collapsed within hours. Clients withdrew. Investors vanished. Their public silence screamed louder than any denial. Sterling's Veterans Foundation cut ties. His portraits disappeared from brochures. His seat on the board quietly revoked. Vivian's charity events postponed indefinitely. No one wanted her name on their banners. And Declan, the golden boy, the heir, the pride of Draven, was suddenly unreachable. I didn't need to confront them face to face. They were already surrounded by their own reflection. That evening, the city outside glowed orange in the sunset, a color too beautiful for the ruins it lit. My phone rang again. Vivian's number. I let it play to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker. We've lost everything because of you. I hope you're proud. I listened halfway, then deleted it. And for the first time, I realized pride had nothing to do with it. I didn't need revenge. I just needed freedom. No anger, no triumph, just stillness, the kind that comes after a storm. Because it wasn't me who ruined them. It was the truth they built their lives on, collapsing under its own weight. They wanted to rewrite history. Instead, history remembered me. A week later, I set a small table in my apartment. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken, garlic bread, and a bottle of red wine. Around me sat Jonah, steady as always, Nora, sharp and smiling, Rowena, quiet but radiant, her presence like a bridge back to my mother. We ate, talked, and laughed softly. No cameras, no family crests, no rehearsed speeches. Just people, real, imperfect, free. For the first time, I looked around a table and thought, this is family. Not by blood, not by duty, but by truth and choice. After the dishes were cleared, I drove across town to Oakwood Cemetery. The streets were hushed, the air heavy with that sacred stillness that only comes after survival. I found her name etched in gray granite. My mother, the woman who believed in me when the world tried to erase me. I knelt, placed a folded letter beneath her stone. It read, I kept your name clean. I am free now. The wind rustled through the oaks, and I could almost hear her whisper. Not words, just peace. Back home, a voicemail light blinked red. Vivian's voice again. Venom, blame, regret. Halfway through, I deleted it. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was mine. I sat by the window, Austin glowing against the night. They called me ungrateful, but I have never been more grateful in my life. Grateful for the courage to walk away. Grateful for the chance to rewrite my story. Grateful for the peace that followed truth. Because sometimes peace isn't given, it's chosen. If my story touched something in you, say hi in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. It helps to know none of us are alone.
I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. The hallway outside the suite was quiet, carpeted in that thick, expensive way that makes footsteps feel like secrets. I rolled my suitcase slowly past the spa, past the check-in desk where we'd first arrived, smiling 3 women who looked like family. My mother, Diane, had whispered it behind the cabana, away from the music, away from the stairs. You're ruining this for your sister. Just go. And I did. I don't know if Brielle, my younger sister, was surprised when I left. I think she was halfway through another story about her friend Amber's yacht party. I think she wanted me gone. I don't think she thought I'd actually go, but I had to. I'd spent nearly $8,000 planning this trip. First-class flights using my saved miles, the beachfront suite, the dinner reservations and quiet walking tours. A full week in Miami to celebrate Mom's 62nd birthday. I had arranged everything. I had paid for almost everything, and now I was the only one walking away from it. Maybe that's what stung the most. When the taxi pulled up, the driver asked if I needed help with my bag. I shook my head. My voice didn't trust itself. Inside the car, I finally let myself breathe. This wasn't how it was supposed to go, not after everything I'd done. Not after all the years I stayed silent, stayed strong, stayed useful. But maybe walking away was the most honest thing I'd ever done. It's strange how early roles stick to you even when no one says them out loud. I've always been the capable one, not the pretty one that was always Brielle, not the fun one that was Mom, especially after a glass of white wine. I was the one who got the paper towels without being asked, who remembered the hotel key, who double-checked the gate number even when it wasn't my flight. After Dad died, things shifted fast. I was 12 and Brielle was barely 6. Mom Diane was suddenly a widow with 2 daughters and a mortgage and no college degree. She went back to school at night, worked full-time as a nurse during the day, and ran on black coffee and nerves. I learned early how not to be one more thing she had to manage. I made my own lunch. I got Brielle ready for school. I sat in the waiting room of Mom's second job doing homework under fluorescent lights while she finished her shift. Sometimes she'd look at me and say, "Thank God for you, Erin." I lived for those words. They weren't warm exactly, but they were something close to love. Brielle, meanwhile, got softness. Hugs. Excuses. She was sensitive. She got overwhelmed easily. Mom used to say she was like a little flower with thin skin. When she didn't want to go to school, she stayed home. When I didn't want to go, I went anyway. There's a memory that always comes back when I'm hurt, though I don't like it. It was my 10th birthday. Dad had been gone almost a year. Mom was working a double shift trying to afford new tires for the car. I understood. I didn't expect balloons or cake. But I did leave a note on the fridge the night before that said Erin's birthday, 10 years old, just in case she forgot. She did. That night she came home exhausted and asked if I could heat up some leftover chili for dinner. I did. We ate quietly. She didn't notice anything strange. After Brielle went to bed, I washed the dishes and then went into my room where I finally let the tears come. 2 months later, Brielle turned 4. There were balloons, a cake with her name spelled in purple icing, a little crown from the party store. Mom took pictures on a disposable Kodak and called her my sunshine girl. I didn't resent Brielle then. Not exactly. But a seed had been planted one I'd keep watering for decades. Now, at 31, I had become the one who handled things, the one who made sure life didn't unravel. And even when I left that hotel suite in Miami, even when Mom told me to go, I still left behind a folder of reservation confirmations labeled by day and time with notes and instructions. Because no matter how invisible I felt, I didn't know how to stop being useful. The idea for the trip came to me on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day that makes you realize how fragile people really are. Mom had just gotten out of the hospital. It wasn't a heart attack, thank God, just stress-related symptoms, the doctor said. But I had seen her in that thin gown wires taped to her chest, her lips pale. And I thought if something happens to her, this is the last version of us we'll ever be. So I planned something beautiful, not extravagant, not flashy, just careful, thoughtful, the way I knew how to love. A full week in Miami for her 62nd birthday. Warm sun, beachfront mornings, something she would never buy for herself. I started a savings folder in January. Every time I skipped takeout or delayed buying new shoes, the money went in. I booked the suite 6 months in advance to lock in a discount. I used my airline miles to upgrade our flights to first class. Mom had never flown anything but economy. I wanted her to feel seen, just once. I called restaurants and asked about low-sodium options. I printed out menus. I made notes about shade availability for Mom's sun-sensitive skin and Brielle's aversion to crowds. I created 2 versions of each itinerary, one for sun, one for rain. It was exhausting, but also quietly joyful. Because maybe for once I wouldn't have to explain myself. Maybe they would see what this was. Not a flex, not control, just love done the only way I knew how. When I told them about the trip, Brielle squealed. Finally, a real vacation. Mom's eyes got glassy. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, I said, and I did, truly. I didn't expect anything in return, at least that's what I told myself. But a small hidden part of me hoped maybe this would be the moment, the one where they looked at me, not as the organizer, the bank account, the reliable one, but simply as Erin. The warning signs were quiet, like hairline cracks in a glass you don't realize is breaking until it shatters in your hand. It started with the flight. I had managed to get us first-class tickets with my saved miles. The only flight within budget was the 7:10 a.m. departure early but direct, and it included complimentary car service. I texted the itinerary to both of them. Brielle replied with a groan emoji and ugh, do we have to leave before sunrise? I'm not human until at least 10. I answered lightly. It was the only option that didn't cost an extra $300 each, plus breakfast on board. A few hours later, Mom called me. Couldn't you have found something later in the day? She asked. You know your sister doesn't do well in the mornings. I sat at my desk staring at the screen full of campaign briefs. I tried, Mom. The later flights were double the price. She sighed not unkindly. I just don't want this trip to start off with her cranky. I bit down on the urge to say, maybe she could try not being cranky. Instead, I said, I'll bring coffee. That was the first moment I felt the edges of my effort curling inward. But I pushed it aside. Then came the hotel. I had chosen a quiet resort in North Beach, less party, more peace. The lobby gleamed with sunlight and marble. The staff greeted us by name. It felt like a win. When we reached the suite, Brielle immediately said, So which room's mine? I had planned it out. Mom would get the master, of course. Brielle and I would take the two smaller rooms mine, the one with the partial ocean view. Mom gets the master, I said, and I'll take the one facing the city. Brielle blinked. But I wanted the ocean view. There was a pause, a soft silence that somehow put the weight on me. So I switched. It's fine, I said. Take it. Later that afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with someone, probably Amber. This place is okay, she said. Kind of tame, though. Aaron planned everything, obviously. I didn't say anything. Dinner that night was at a waterfront seafood place I'd carefully vetted. I requested outdoor seating for the view. Halfway through appetizers, Brielle complained, "It's too hot, and this ceviche is like too limey." Mom gave me a look, not harsh, just tired. Maybe we should have eaten inside. I nodded and flagged the waiter. We rushed through the meal, barely talking. Back at the hotel, I heard Brielle say as she passed me in the hallway, "Next time I'm planning the trip." I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes, but I still told myself it's only the first day. It'll get better. It didn't. The next morning, I woke early. Not from excitement, just habit. I slipped out of the suite while they were still asleep and made my way down to the beach. The hotel offered a limited number of premium cabanas, first come first served, so I got there by 7:00 a.m. beach towel over my shoulder, iced coffee in hand. I chose one in the adults-only section with a misting fan and plenty of shade. I scheduled a fruit platter and coffee service to be delivered at 10:00. It was the kind of detail I liked to get right. By 9:30, I was back in the suite. Mom and Brielle were still in pajamas, scrolling on their phones. "Good morning," I said brightly. "I got us a great cabana. Breakfast will be waiting there in half an hour." Mom looked up already, frowning. "I don't know if I want to sit at the beach all day. It's supposed to be hot." "There's a misting fan," I said gently. "And it's adults only, no kids running around." Brielle added, "I kind of wanted to check out that mall we passed yesterday." I paused. "I thought we could do the Art Deco walking tour after lunch." "I already booked it." Mom and Brielle exchanged a glance. "Let's just go with the flow," Mom said. "It's a vacation, not a business trip." That stung more than I expected. We finally made it to the cabana 2 hours late. The fruit platter had wilted. The coffee was cold. No one mentioned it. That evening, Brielle casually said, "Oh, by the way, I told Amber to meet us for drinks tonight. She lives in Miami." I reminded them about our dinner reservation booked weeks ago, credit card secured cancellation fee included. Brielle shrugged. "We can skip it. Amber knows better spots anyway." I looked at Mom. She looked away. That's when the first crack widened, not loud, not dramatic. Just the quiet realization that I was the only one still trying to make this trip what it was meant to be. It was the following afternoon when the alert hit my phone, a soft chime, almost apologetic. I glanced down. 340 XHs, Hotel Spa. I blinked. I hadn't booked any spa treatments. I was still holding the phone when I walked back into the suite. Mom and Brielle were getting ready for dinner. Brielle was curling her hair at the mirror, humming along to music on her phone. "Did either of you go to the spa today?" I asked, as casually as I could manage. Brielle answered without turning around. "Oh yeah, Amber and I got massages after lunch. Mine was deep tissue." Heaven. My voice stayed low. It charged to my card. She paused as if surprised I brought it up. "Well, yeah. I figured since you've been handling everything else, you wouldn't mind." I stared at her. "You didn't even ask." She rolled her eyes. "Don't make it a big thing. You have a good job, Aaron. A massage is nothing." Mom came out of the bathroom, catching the tail end. "What's going on?" Brielle charged nearly $350 to my card without asking. Mom frowned, but not in the way I needed. "Brielle, you really should have asked first." Then she turned to me. "I'm sure she'll pay you back." But we all knew she wouldn't. I didn't say anything more. I just nodded and walked out to the balcony. The sun was starting to set, casting the sky in soft coral. It should have been beautiful. I should have felt proud this trip, this view, this moment I'd built. Instead, I felt hollow. It wasn't just the money. It was how easily I'd been made invisible in my own generosity. How no one hesitated to spend what I had saved. How quickly my effort became an expectation. That night, we went to dinner like nothing had happened. Amber joined us. The conversation swirled around rooftop bars and influencer restaurants. I sat at the edge of it all, smiling politely, calculating the growing bill in my head and wondering for the first time if maybe I didn't belong here anymore. I woke up early on Mom's birthday, even before the sun had broken over the water. The suite was still quiet. Brielle's door was closed. Mom's room was dark. I moved silently, almost reverently, gathering what I had prepared the night before. The card, the ribbon-wrapped envelope, the tiny bouquet I'd asked the concierge to hold in the kitchen fridge. With Louise's help, the same concierge who'd helped me with our check-in, I'd arranged a private birthday breakfast on the balcony, fresh fruit warm pastries, gourmet coffee, and chilled champagne for mimosas. The table was already set with white linens and polished silver. I placed the card beside Mom's plate, tucked the flowers into the center. Then I waited. At 9:00 they emerged. Brielle was still in sleep shorts, scrolling her phone. Mom looked surprised, but in a soft-touched way when she saw the setup. "Happy birthday," I said. "I thought we could start the day here, just us." Mom smiled, truly smiled. "This is lovely, Erin." "Thank you." For a few minutes, it felt like something had cracked open just enough to let the light in. We clinked glasses. We laughed about Mom's dislike of orange pulp. I thought maybe finally this would be the day we found our rhythm. Then Brielle's phone chimed. "Amber says there's a beach club party today. Her friend's the hostess, she can get us on the VIP list." I looked at Mom. "I already booked us a cabana at Laya Beach Club. It's quieter." "More your speed," Brielle scoffed. "That one's boring. No DJs, no scene." Mom hesitated, then turned to me. "Can we change it?" Just this once, I didn't answer right away. Just folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. Another deposit lost. Another plan erased. I smiled anyway. "I'll see what I can do." And I meant it. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I was starting to understand exactly where I stood. Amber was already waiting by the velvet rope when we arrived at Azure, the beach club she'd raved about. Her sunglasses were oversized, her laugh loud, her hug with Brielle dramatic. "Happy birthday, Mrs. Malloy," she said, air-kissing Mom like they'd known each other for years. A security guard checked a clipboard. Amber whispered something. We were waved in. Brielle shot me a look, half smug, half triumphant. I didn't return it. Inside, the place pulsed with bass and heat. Neon swimwear servers with trays of vodka shots a DJ spinning something that sounded like adrenaline. I glanced at Mom. Her smile was polite, strained. We were led to a cabana right next to the speakers. Prime location, apparently. The waiter explained the rules quickly. Minimum spend $300. Tab required. I handed over my card. Again. "Can we move to a quieter section?" I asked. It's my mom's birthday, and she'd like to hear herself think. The waiter gave me a look, dry, vaguely condescending. "These are the premium spots. If you wanted quiet, maybe try a hotel pool." Amber laughed. "Oh, come on. It's fun. Your mom will love it." We settled in. Drinks arrived. Then more people, Amber's friends. Loud, gorgeous, not introduced. They made themselves at home in our space. Mom shrank into the corner, sipping water. Brielle seemed oblivious. I tried to breathe through it. Then one of Amber's friends, a woman in a gold bikini, reached into my beach bag, pulled out my sunscreen, sprayed herself, then tossed it aside like trash. I stood up. "Excuse me, that's my bag." She shrugged, unfazed. "Sharing is caring, right?" She reached again. I grabbed the bag, pulling it away, knocking over her drink by accident. The glass shattered on the concrete. She jumped up. What the hell? People turned. Amber, her friends, Brielle. "Mom." She was going through my things, I said, without asking. Brielle hissed. "Why are you making a scene?" I stared at her, stunned. "A scene," I repeated. I looked around at the strangers, the tab, the empty chair beside my mother where I'd hoped to sit and watch the ocean, and I felt it, not anger, something quieter, heavier, like the last inch of rope slipping through your fingers when you've been holding on too long. I didn't trust myself to speak in front of all those eyes, so I turned and walked, past the lounge chairs, past the DJ booth vibrating with bass, toward the edge of the cabana where the noise faded just enough to think. Mom followed me. She caught up near a potted palm, her sandals crunching lightly on the stone. "Erin," she said, voice low. "What are you doing?" I turned to face her. She was going through my bag. None of them asked. None of them even looked at you. This isn't what I planned. Mom folded her arms, her face tight. I know you meant well, but this whole trip you've been rigid, controlling. Brielle feels like she can't relax around you. I blinked. Controlling. I just want everyone to enjoy themselves. And I want to be respected, I said. For once. She didn't respond, so I added softer. You're not even enjoying this place, are you? Her eyes flicked away. Then she said it. Not loud, not angry, just tired. You're ruining this for your sister. Just leave. That was it. No one came after me as I walked back through the crowd. Not Brielle, not Amber, not even my mother. The bouncer gave me a glance as I passed one that was oddly sympathetic, like he'd seen this before. Outside, the air was clearer, real. The city hummed in the distance. I hailed a cab, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going back to make things right. Back at the suite, the room was still, the kind of stillness that feels both peaceful and hollow. I packed slowly. I folded each dress, each blouse, placing them back in my suitcase with the same care I used to plan this trip. I zipped the packing cubes, charged my phone, printed my boarding pass at the lobby kiosk. Then I opened the folder I had made for the week Mom's birthday Miami 3-day itinerary and rewrote the schedule. I crossed out canceled reservations, moved spa appointments, added backup options in case they got lost again. I printed that too. Left it on the dining table beside a new envelope remaining trip funds transferred to Mom's bank account. Underneath, I left a note. Everything is prepaid through Thursday. If you need help, ask Louise at the front desk. She knows your names. That was all. No guilt. No please call me. No apology. Just a quiet end to a story I wasn't allowed to finish. At the elevator, I hesitated. Not because I wanted to stay, but because I realized I didn't know who I was outside of this role. The fixer, the buffer, the one who made it all look effortless. What happens when you stop holding the pieces together? The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. And for once, I didn't leave anything behind by mistake. I landed in Atlanta just after midnight. No missed calls, no voicemails. By morning, there was one text from Mom. Just 4 words. Let me know you're safe. I replied, I am. She didn't answer. The next 2 days stretched out like ribbon, quiet, loose, unfamiliar. I worked from home, caught up on emails, took long walks, made a full breakfast for no one but myself. And then Linda called. Linda's my cousin. Technically Mom's niece, but in truth more like my sister growing up. She lived 3 hours from Miami and had offered to meet up for dinner during the trip. I'd told her not to bother, it was supposed to be a small family thing. Now she was calling to ask what the hell had happened. Apparently, Brielle had posted a video. A reel, loud music, champagne, flutes, a caption. When your sister ruins the trip so you make it better without her. But she hadn't disabled the comments, and people were asking questions. Linda had already seen enough to piece together the truth. Your mom looked miserable in that clip, she said. And you weren't even mentioned. Not once. Not even a thank you for the hotel. I said nothing. They're on their way back early, she added. Saw a picture of them at the airport this morning. Not smiling. I nodded more to myself than her. The silence after that call felt different. Not empty, but earned. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat on my porch. The sun dipped low, lighting the trees with gold. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't buzzing with someone else's needs. Just one notification. A Venmo transfer from Mom. $340 note spa. No words, no apology, but it landed heavier than any speech could have. It was raining when they came back, not a thunderstorm, just a soft, steady curtain of gray that made the porch creak and the wind smell like pine. I heard the tires before I saw the car, the familiar crunch of gravel in the driveway. Then the knock. Not urgent, not timid. Just there. I opened the door. Mom stood with her suitcase beside her. No umbrella. Hair damp, eyes tired. Brielle trailed a few steps behind, arms folded across her chest like she didn't know what to do with them. No one spoke at first. Then Mom said we came back early. I nodded. I figured. She shifted her weight, looked past me into the house. Can we come in? I stepped aside. They walked in like guests, not like family. Mom noticed the clean kitchen counter, the folded laundry basket, the absence of chaos. I could almost see her calculating what hadn't fallen apart without her. We sat in the living room, me in the armchair, them on the couch. The same arrangement we used when Dad was still alive and arguments needed settling. Only this time, no one was yelling. Mom cleared her throat. Things didn't go so well after you left. I didn't respond. Brielle muttered. Amber kind of took over. It got weird. I still said nothing. Because the truth was, I didn't need to hear how things fell apart. They were never really together in the first place. The silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, just long enough to make them sit in it. Mom was the one to break it. I didn't realize how much you'd done. Until you were gone. She said it carefully, like placing china on a shelf she wasn't sure would hold. I always knew you were reliable, she continued. But I let that mean you didn't need anything. I looked at her then. She looked older than before the trip. Not from travel, something deeper. Like the weight had finally settled in. Brielle picked at a thread on her sleeve. Amber said some things after you left. Not nice ones. I raised an eyebrow, and you defended me. Her face flushed. I didn't say anything. I should have. I know. She didn't cry. I didn't expect her to. But there was a shift in her posture, like the armor she wore was made of paper and it finally got wet. I didn't mean to take advantage, she said. I'm used to you fixing things. That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever gotten from her. Mom leaned forward. I didn't want you to leave. Not really. I didn't know how to stop it from spiraling. You didn't stop it, I said gently. You handed me the scissors. She flinched just slightly, but she nodded. I'm not asking you to fix this, Mom said. I just want you to know. I see it now. What you've carried. What it cost you. For a moment, I didn't know what to do with that, because for so long I had lived in the space between being needed and being seen. And now that she finally saw me, I wasn't sure I wanted to be needed anymore. I stood up. I'm going to make some tea, I said. You can stay the night if you want. Spare room's clean. They looked up at me. No pushback, no begging. Just quiet, the kind that sometimes means more than forgiveness. They stayed one night. Quiet, respectful. No one asked for anything. No one raised their voice. Brielle did the dishes without being told. Mom folded the blanket on the couch before she left. The next morning they drove off in the same silence they'd brought with them. I didn't watch them go. Instead, I watered the plants, answered a few work emails, took the longer walk to the mailbox, letting the morning sun touch my shoulders. There was no apology card, no grand gesture waiting. But a few days later, a package arrived. No note, just a small photo book printed and bound. Pictures from past birthdays, old vacations, a few I had forgotten even existed. On the last page, someone Mom, I think, had handwritten one line. You were always there. I stared at it for a long time, not because it fixed anything, but because for once it didn't expect me to. I closed the book, placed it on the shelf, not too high, not hidden either. Just there. And that night I booked a solo trip for myself. Someplace quiet, someplace warm, no itineraries, no guests. I didn't tell anyone, didn't leave a folder, didn't leave a key. They didn't say it behind my back. They said it right to my face. I was still in my gas station uniform, wiping down the counter for the third time that hour. A couple had spilled half a slushie and walked off without so much as a nod. The buzz of the freezer hummed in the background. I was just about to check the coffee machine when my phone lit up beside the register. Sabine Quinn just posted a new photo. My thumb hovered, then tapped. I wish I hadn't. There she was, my little sister, grinning with her arms stretched wide in front of a silver Mercedes with a bow on top. The caption read, "Graduated in style. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Blessed beige Mercedes baby." The location tag, Four Seasons Hotel Charlotte. There were balloons, champagne, designer heels, hundreds of comments, queen emojis, fire emojis, slay girl, obsessed. I just stood there, sticky cloth in one hand, the other, holding my phone like a punch I didn't see coming. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't invited. I put the phone face down and kept wiping. There was no one to complain to. I didn't even bother asking why. I already knew the answer. When my shift ended, I rode the bus home and sat on the edge of my twin mattress. I stared at the wall, too tired to cry, too used to it. Sabine was the star. Always had been. Honor roll, pageants, influencer brand deals. She looked like a magazine cover and the world loved her for it. And me? I was what happened when things didn't go according to plan. No degree, no sparkle. Just hours on a time card and a 15-year-old car with one door that didn't open from the inside. A week later, I showed up at my parents' house with a birthday card and a bundle of gas station flowers I bought on clearance. My shoes were still dusty from my shift, but I wanted to see my mom's face light up. They were having brunch. Not just a casual one, this was a catered linen napkin kind of affair for Sabine and her college friends. Everyone was dressed like they stepped off Pinterest. My mom took the flowers without looking up. "You should have called," she said. "We already have guests." I offered to help in the kitchen, hoping just a small hope that she'd let me belong for 10 minutes. She hesitated, then looked toward the dining room. "Maybe just take the trash out, Mava. The girls are eating. I don't want anyone feeling uncomfortable." I didn't say anything, just took the bag and walked out back. On my way back in, I heard laughter from the dining room. I froze near the hallway. Dorian's voice carried through. "She's going places, you know, not like some people wasting their lives behind a counter." There it was. I stood there a second longer, then walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and didn't move, not for 5 minutes, not for 20. I wasn't sad anymore. I was something else. By the time I got home, I knew exactly what I needed to do. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I just sat on my mattress with my back against the wall and a pen in my hand. I pulled out an old notebook I used to keep grocery lists in and flipped to a blank page. The lines were faded, but it didn't matter. At the top, I wrote, "I am done trying to be seen." Underneath, I wrote all the things I wasn't going to chase anymore: apologies, approval, a seat at any table that made me feel like a burden. I didn't need them to clap. I needed to build a life that didn't disappear the moment they looked away. The knock at the door came right after midnight. It wasn't loud, just a soft, familiar rhythm. Pop. He let himself in before I could stand up. "Didn't mean to drop by so late," he said, holding up a bag of groceries. "You eat today?" I lied. "Yeah." He glanced around the room like he already knew I hadn't. Then he set the bag down and sat beside me on the floor, back against the same wall. We didn't say much for a while. He opened a can of peaches and handed me half. I took them, chewing slowly, more out of respect than hunger. "You're holding something in," he finally said. I didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, beat-up brass keychain. The letters on it were almost worn away, but you could still make out the words, "Built Not Bought." "Carried this with me since '74, he said. "First house I ever built. Didn't know what I was doing, just had a shovel, a toolbox, and a will too damn stubborn to quit. Everyone thought I'd mess it up. Maybe I did. But I finished it anyway." He held it out to me. "Figure it's time someone else carried it." I stared at it for a long time before taking it. It was heavier than it looked. "I don't have a plan yet," I whispered. "You don't need one yet," he said. "Just keep stacking bricks, mental, emotional, financial, whatever kind you've got. A foundation shows up if you do." He left shortly after. Didn't hug me, didn't linger. Just said lock the door behind me, all right, and disappeared into the night. I sat there for a while, just me and the keychain. Then I reached for a crumpled gas station receipt on the floor and flipped it over. I wrote 4 words in all caps: "Build something they can't ignore." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was beginning something. Not flashy, not loud, but mine. I didn't know where to begin, so I started with Google. How to build something from nothing. That was the first thing I typed. It led me down a rabbit hole of midnight research articles on side hustles, videos about wholesaling houses, forums full of strangers flipping homes without loans. Most of it sounded like a scam, but I kept digging. Somewhere between exhaustion and quiet rage, I found a podcast called Brick by Brick Real Estate for Beginners. I downloaded every episode and started listening to it during my bus rides to work. I made a list of what I needed: time, money, patience, and grit. I was already used to being broke. Grit I had, patience I could learn, time I'd just have to steal it from myself. I canceled every subscription. No more takeout, no more $2 energy drinks. I sold my TV for $75 cash on Marketplace. It hurt more than I expected, like cutting a cord to my last form of escape. I opened a new bank account and labeled it Freedom. I started putting away whatever I could, tips from late shifts, spare change from rounding down at the grocery store. Sometimes it was only $1, but the balance grew 1 gritty cent at a time. Then I found a real estate course online for $40. The site looked like it hadn't been updated since 2010, but the content was real videos, PDFs, downloadable contracts. I printed everything at the library and brought the packet to work. When customers weren't around, I kept the notes open under the counter. I studied during lunch breaks and before bed. I started to see patterns in the deals people talked about: distressed properties, motivated sellers wholesaling without cash or credit. I wasn't trying to be a mogul. I just wanted one chance. That chance came on a rainy Tuesday night. I was on register when a regular walked in. Dennis Scruffy Boots faded jeans. He bought a black coffee and a lottery ticket. We talked about the weather like always. Then he sighed and said, "You wouldn't happen to know anyone who wants a moldy old house, would you? I just inherited one from my uncle, things barely standing." I paused. "Where is it, edge of Ridgeview? Cracked foundation? Smells like swamp. You selling it?" He raised an eyebrow. "You buying?" I shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I know someone who would." That night I drove to see it. I wore my cleanest hoodie and took photos with a borrowed phone. The house leaned like it was tired, but I saw past the water damage and sagging walls. I saw potential. I saw proof that I could do something bigger than gas station floors and sympathy glances. I posted in a Facebook investor group that night. One woman responded. Her name was Janelle. She asked for numbers. I gave her everything I had: photos, repair estimates, comps. She said she'd take it if I could lock it for under 70Ks. I got Dennis to sign a contract for $65,000. I assigned it to her 3 days later. My cut $5,000. No hammer, no loans, just knowledge and a yes. I used part of the $5,000 to register my LLC, Marvin Properties, a name stitched from mine and Pop's Mava and Calvin. I printed business cards at the library, bought stamps in batches of 10, and spent nights handwriting letters to every absentee homeowner I could find in the county registry. I cold-called strangers on my 10-minute breaks behind the gas station, the scent of burnt coffee and spilled diesel in the air. Most hung up, some swore, a few listened, and 2 of those turned into deals. Small ones, but they mattered. I made $3 $200 on one, $6 $100 on the other. I didn't buy anything for myself. I didn't celebrate. I just moved the money into my Freedom account and started the process again. I kept my day job. I couldn't afford not to. My body was tired, but my mind was burning. I didn't need applause. I needed progress. Then one day, while scrolling on my cracked screen during lunch, I saw Sabine's newest post. She stood in front of a white mansion, not mine, not yet, with a caption that read, "Some people just won't catch up." Different levels. It wasn't subtle. It didn't have to be. The comments flooded in. Iconic, built different, leave the slow ones behind. I locked my phone. My hands shook. I wasn't angry. I was just so tired of disappearing. Later that week, I helped with my first renovation. A local investor offered to let me assist on a flip. I said yes without hesitating. I scraped floors, hauled demo trash, painted until my arms ached. And every time I opened a window in that dusty house, I could almost see the future. One night, long after everyone else had gone home, I sat alone on the unfinished stairwell. Drywall dust clung to my jeans. I was supposed to be proud. I was building something. But instead, I cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears that didn't ask for comfort. The kind that came from being proud and invisible at the same time. I heard the door creak open. Pop stepped in holding a thermos. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't need to. He sat beside me on the stairs, handed me the cup, and rested his hand over mine. "You hear that?" he asked. I looked around. "What?" "That sound," he said, tapping his chest like something cracking open. I nodded barely. "That's not you breaking, baby girl," he said gently. "That's the wall. You're breaking through." I didn't answer. I just leaned into his shoulder and for the first time in a long time, let someone hold the weight with me. The next morning, I ordered new flyers. Not flashy, just bold enough. It took 27 months, 4 contracts, 2 flips, and more rejections than I could count. But I did it. I bought a house. Not just any house, a 6-bedroom estate on the edge of Asheville. White pillars, wraparound porch, tall windows that let in morning light like it was trying to bless you. It needed work, but I wanted the work. I wanted every nail and screw to carry my name. I walked through it alone the day the sale closed barefoot on the newly polished wood. The house was empty, but I didn't feel alone. I felt present, like I'd stepped into a future I hadn't dared name until it stood solid beneath my feet. I designed everything from the crown molding to the curved stairwell. I chose a soft green for the kitchen walls because it reminded me of Pop's thermos. I picked black iron railings for the balcony, strong, understated, honest. I built a small library into the study with reclaimed oak, even though I only owned 6 books. I figured I'd grow into it. I didn't throw a party. I didn't announce it. I didn't post a single photo. I kept it quiet not out of shame, but because this win didn't belong to the internet. It belonged to the girl who used to sleep beside her tool bag because she couldn't afford to lose one more thing. The listing hadn't been updated yet. The house had only come off the market 3 days earlier, and the photos were still circulating on rental sites. I didn't think much of it until I heard tires crunching over gravel outside my gate. I looked up from the dining table I was polishing. A black Range Rover was easing up the drive. It was Sabine's. I stood still. A moment later, the doors opened, and out stepped my mother, my father, Sabine, and a woman I didn't recognize, probably a friend or a photographer. Sabine was dressed in head-to-toe cream. She walked like she'd done it 1,000 times, chin high, phone out, recording everything. My parents followed close behind as if they were inspecting a model home, unaware they'd just walked into something they had no idea how to value. I stepped onto the porch, holding the keys, heart steady. They hadn't come to see me. They didn't even know I lived here. They thought this was another luxury backdrop for Sabine's curated life. But this wasn't a rental. And I wasn't the help. I waited until Sabine tilted her head for a better selfie angle until she looked toward the door and froze. I didn't say anything, not yet. I just let the keys hang loose in my hand, the sun catching the brass the same way her caption used to catch hearts. Sabine saw me first. Her phone dipped a little confused like her screen wasn't syncing with reality. Then she squinted and took a few steps closer. My mother followed, adjusting her sunglasses. My father lingered by the car, arms crossed, already judging the landscaping. Sabine tilted her head. Maeva. What are you doing here? I didn't move. I just lifted the key ring and let it dangle in the sun. This is my house. Sabine laughed, a short burst that didn't quite land. Wait, are you staging it or something? Like working the open house? No, I said calmly. I don't live here either. Now she looked truly lost. Then, what I own it. Silence. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father took a step forward. What are you saying? You bought this. With my company, I replied. Marvin Properties. I handled the acquisition, managed the renovations, paid in full. No loans, no help. The gravel shifted behind them. Another car pulled in Pop's pickup, old and dusty, and familiar as a heartbeat. He parked slowly, then stepped out, taking in the house like he already knew every inch of it. He didn't look at Sabine. Or my parents. He walked straight toward me. When he reached the porch, he paused, eyes soft, proud. You built it tall enough, he said, voice low, reverent. I swallowed the lump in my throat as he pulled me into a hug. For a moment, I forgot the others even existed. There was just his hand on my back, and the keychain in my palm, his keychain. Built, not bought. When he stepped inside, I turned back to the driveway. You're welcome to come in, I said, if you want. None of them moved. My mother scanned the porch railing. My father looked at the wide steps like they didn't quite belong to me. Sabine lowered her phone and finally stopped filming. No one said a word, so I turned and walked into the house. I didn't wait for footsteps behind me. I didn't check the window to see if they followed. I just walked through the foyer I'd restored with my own hands and let the silence speak for me. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was pouring coffee in the kitchen. It was from my mother. We're proud of you. 4 words. No punctuation, no apology, no explanation. I stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't feel like a triumph. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like a receipt confirmation of something long overdue, but offered too late to matter. I thought about all the nights I went to bed wondering what was wrong with me, the birthdays I spent alone, the way they used my silence as evidence that I didn't care when really I just didn't know how to keep bleeding for people who called it weakness. I thought about the way my mother had looked at the railing I built as if trying to find cracks in it, about the way my father couldn't say a word once the facts were too big to ignore, about how Sabine had stood frozen for once without a caption. And then I deleted the message, not out of bitterness, just clarity. I no longer needed proof that I was enough. They saw me now, maybe, but I'd been real this whole time. Just because someone finally opens their eyes doesn't mean you were invisible before. Pop and I had breakfast on the back porch. He told me about the crooked chimney he'd built on his first house, how it leaned but never fell. We laughed about it over scrambled eggs. That meant more to me than any message ever could. Later that day, I drove out to a property 2 towns over to meet a seller. The roof was half caved in. I saw the same thing I always did, possibility under the wreckage. I walked through the weeds and imagined what it could be, not because I needed to prove anything anymore, because I had finally remembered who I was building for. Maria and Elijah used to share night shifts with me at the station. They saw me before the polished floors and porch columns back when I was still wiping counters and counting coins for rent. When they asked how I did it, I didn't give them speeches. I gave them tools. I printed out my original scripts, gave them copies of the old course. PDFs walked them through how to talk to sellers and handle silence on the other end of the phone. They showed up early, stayed late, asked hard questions. When they closed their first deal, $200 on a wholesale in Ridgeview, we met for coffee at the spot near the old station. I brought them each a keychain. Same brass, same words, built, not bought. They understood. A week later, I saw a photo Sabine had posted. She was standing in front of my house smiling into the camera. The caption, "Dream Home Vibes," or manifested. She didn't tag me, didn't mention me. Just used it as a backdrop like everything else. I looked at the screen, then set the phone down. I wasn't angry, not even surprised. I walked to my bookshelf where Pop's original keychain still sat scratched, dulled, solid. I placed it on the top shelf next to the first ledger I ever used to track expenses. The brass caught a sliver of afternoon sun and glowed. She could have the photos. I had the foundation. Most mornings I water the garden before the sun gets too high. It's not much, just herbs, tomatoes, a stubborn fig tree that refuses to give up, but it grows. Like I did. Pop still visits every Sunday. We drink coffee on the back porch, talk about roof angles and soil drainage like we're running a tiny empire. He always brings something, an old blueprint, a story I haven't heard, a reminder that building runs in the blood. There's no applause, no spotlight, just steady mornings and floors that don't creak when I walk on them. I used to chase their attention like oxygen. Now I breathe just fine without it. The ledger's full, the keychain's polished, the front door closes soft and sure. Sometimes I think about that girl behind the counter counting pennies, pretending not to notice when people didn't look her in the eye. I hope she'd be proud of who we became. They still don't talk about me much. That's all right. I didn't do this to be remembered by them. I did it to remember myself. They thought I'd always be behind the counter, but I became the architect of my own front door.